Hi, in this video, I'm going to be showing you how I painted this cow for the Opus painting demo on the 12th of December. This is for those of you who joined the demo and wanted to see the rest of the painting, or anybody else who wanted to check it out. I'm going to leave a timestamp for when it skips to the time lapse of me painting the full cow, and the first part will be kind of a downscaled video of the Zoom demonstration. Thank you all for watching. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. It's a little opaque, I feel like, compared to usually other cadmium-free or cadmium yellows that I use, which is really cool. And then I also have I believe it's, yeah, transparent red ochre, which is a fantastic color. And then I have French ultramarine, magenta, and then I have raw umber right here. I included the raw umber mainly because I want to talk about a couple ways you could use it if you're wanting to paint in multiple stages. But I also wanted to include it because it's my favorite color, and you can also use it to just kind of quickly desaturate something or make it a little bit darker. So this is kind of the cow we're going to be painting. I have a little thumbnail sketch of it. Uh, to get started off, usually what I'll do is I will prime my canvas with usually raw umber, but I usually sometimes I'll combine it with different colors. Like I'll do raw umber and ultramarine blue. And let me go ahead and brush really quick. Get some paper towels ready. I also like to paint with a little nasty glove on my left hand just so it doesn't ruin my skin. I feel like it goes right through the paper towel and makes my hands all dry. So to get started, usually I'll prime the canvas. So I'll usually just take a little bit of raw umber and just kind of, prime the whole canvas, rub it out, and I'll get, a nice little tone that's not white so I can paint over it and have, be able to see my colors a little bit better. Because if you could see here, the titanium white, you could just barely see it. Actually, if I zoom in a little bit, you might be able to see it a little bit better. Yeah. So to get started off, I will usually do a sketch in pencil, or you could use charcoal. Uh, from my experience, I do feel like charcoal has a better reaction with the oil paint. But at the same time, I just like using graphite. It's just simpler. I just use a normal pencil. I will usually spray it with a fixative spray so it doesn't come off. I let it dry, and then I'll go over it with this raw umber so you can kind of, it doesn't move around or anything. Um, for the sketch, I like to usually refine my sketch a little bit after I do my pencil drawing. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be using this ultramarine blue quite a bit with this transparent red ochre. Let me go ahead and zoom out again. And this makes like kind of a black color. This is going to be my darkest color combination. And the more ultramarine blue I add to it, the darker it will get. And that's going to be this color right here. This nice dark, it's almost like a black color. And because I'm using this red ochre, it it's pretty opaque compared to like an ultramarine blue or something. So usually when I'm painting shadows, because obviously my darks are going to be my shadows, I like to have it a little thin. So I usually thin it out a little bit with my mix of linseed oil and Winsor Newton Sansador, which is kind of like like paint thinner turpentine, but it's not really toxic. I wouldn't drink it, but it's not as toxic as turpentine is, or a normal traditional paint thinner. Uh, so I'll take a little bit of this. I might warm it up a little bit. I kind of like my lines a little warmer. So if I want it cooler, just more ultramarine blue, warmer, more red ochre. And then I will just go through here and refine my sketch a little bit. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this part because it's kind of boring. tracing and refining my sketch. Usually, I like to try to get it so it is kind of more blocky. I like to really kind of define like where my edges are within the sketch, like where the main focal points are, maybe where the eye is, I'll kind of darken that out a little bit more. And just kind of define where everything's going to go. I really just want to look at where the shadows are and where the lights are, and just kind of block in the shadows like how I did with the sphere. Um, Once when I have a good refined sketch using this, at that point, I'll usually try to look and decide where my lights are. Something that I've been doing quite a bit lately, and I wanted to include in this demo that I'll talk about a little bit more later as well, is in this sphere, I use just raw umber, which I thinned out with my mix to kind of do like a watercolor. Well, it's not watercolor, but like a watercolor like study of this sphere, just kind of blocking in where the darks are. And then I let it dry. So if I were going to do this again, I would just kind of take like some raw umber, and obviously I don't have a sketch, so it's not going to be a super good sphere. But just kind of block in where my lights are and where my darks are. And once when I have a sphere there, um, I will usually let it dry like I did in this little demo right here. And there's this stuff that I like to use. It's called liquid impasto. Uh, it's a little blurry, but there we go. Sorry, my tube's just destroyed. But this is great because it not only thins out the paint, but it also makes it thick. So I don't know if I'm sure you guys are all familiar with John Singer Sargent's work, who I absolutely love. And something he says is to paint the shadows thickly but transparently. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And it's so hard to do that. And, like, what does he mean by that? Well, I feel like with this mixture, I can kind of do that. I can paint thickly and transparently because it really kind of thins out my titanium white uh with this mixture. It makes it a little thin, it makes it thick, and then I can just kind of block in, where my lights are, but it does it very thinly. And I can bleed it into my shadows as well. And then another little trick I like to do as well is the lighter something gets, the more volume I want in my paint. So the thicker my paint is. This technique is called impasto, where you kind of have like a real thick glob of paint that kind of protrudes out of the canvas. And this is really cool with this particular medium because it makes it kind of effortless, and it kind of keeps it a little transparent also, right? So I kind of have my little sphere going over here. Um, and I want to try to bring that into this painting. Now, usually when I paint a portrait, I'll paint in multiple stages. So I'll do this kind of raw umber sketch here, and then I'll paint over it so I kind of have a base layer. Unfortunately, with time, I don't really have enough time to do that with this guy. So I'm going to paint more directly, but I'm still going to use that same thick to thin method, the thin being the shadows and the thick being the highlights. So it feels like everything that's in the light is coming closer to me and the shadows are going further away from me. And that same kind of concept is up here in the sky as well. This is kind of very thin layer of paint for the sky, whereas the cow is much thicker. And then obviously the shadows of the cow thinner. So a couple other colors I want to go over in the palette before I move on to actually painting the cow is we have our dark setup. So if we want to get more of this kind of fur color, I'll go ahead and take some more of this red ochre, a little bit of my cadmium yellow, It's a little bit too much cadmium yellow. Bit of blue to gray it out. I kind of have a nice little fur color. And this palette makes it pretty simple to navigate different colors pretty easily, uh, especially when painting this kind of like a brown cow. Ultramarine blue, transparent red ochre, that's your darks. Add yellow to it, make it lighter. Add a little bit more transparent red ochre to make it a little bit warmer. And then white will obviously desaturate it, but it'll also bring it up a little bit more, the more yellow, and add a little bit more titanium white. You get kind of a warmer brown yellowish color that I might use, up at the top for like a highlight. For the rest of the painting, there's a really special color in this palette that I included, and it's mainly for this. I like to call it mauve. It's almost like it's like a blue purple. Uh, I don't even know, just kind of like a magenta color, but like a light blue magenta. And I like to consider this as like a transition color. So I just take a little bit of this ultramarine blue, a touch of the magenta, and I get like a really dark purplish color. There's a little bit of yellow left on my brush, but that's okay. And a little bit of this titanium white. It's going to give me kind of this very purplish, bluish color. And this is a great transition color. And what do I mean by that? I could use this color for a bunch of different things. I can use it for the shadow highlights because there are kind of highlights within the shadows. I can use it for the sky. And if a color looks dead, especially in a highlight, I could add a little bit of this color to it to bring it back to life. So if I were going to paint the sky right here, maybe I'll just take a little bit more ultramarine blue, add a little bit of the magenta, kind of darken it up a little bit. And maybe I'll add a little bit of yellow because the sky has a little bit of yellow in it from the sun. And that'll just kind of go right up over here. Now, when I'm painting a sky in a background, I usually want to keep it pretty simple. Uh, and the main thing I want to focus on is the gradation from the top down to where the horizon line is. The top is usually going to be darker, and then as I get lower down to the horizon line, it'll be lighter. So I like to kind of play a little, uh, kind of like a little color variety game where I'll usually have the top cooler, and then as I get closer down, it'll be more yellow, a little warmer, kind of simulate the sun coming up over the horizon line. Just kind of give you a quick little color mix example. Okay. And then if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat and ask me. I'm going to go ahead and move over and kind of show you guys a painting
James,
of the cow. Yeah.
there is a question in the chat. When you were first talking about sketching out your drawing, Ted's wondering, what do you gain by refining the sketch with the paints?
Usually when I refine the sketch with the paints, what'll happen is, like I said, I could kind of get it more blocky because the sketch is kind of loose, and some certain parts I can't really see. It kind of falls away into the under or the stain of the canvas, like that raw umber stain. So when I refine it, I could kind of see it a little bit better. And the main thing is that I incorporate into the drawing is where the darks are. So like where the blackest blacks are, like in the ear of the cow and maybe the eye, that'll be where I kind of refine out the sketch. So here, let me bring this up really quick. So here's that same cow, a little bit more blown up, and I have my sketch refined so I could kind of see like his eye a little bit better. And let me zoom in a little bit. And you see like where like the pencil sketches here, it's kind of hard to see. And it just really kind of gives me like a separation of where I want to go with the painting. Some parts I might sketch out totally, like the background, but for the cow, definitely kind of want to lay in exactly where everything's going to go. I am still going to refine this sketch a little bit more right now with that same color of ultramarine blue and transparent red ochre. But yeah, here I should probably show you guys just for the sake of it what kind of like what I'm going for with this. So this would be kind of a finished example of that same cow. Um, I have my sky here, that mauve color. As it gets down, it gets a little lighter, a little more yellow. Um, Lots of greens, and yeah. So this cow was painted in stages. So I did use quite a bit of this liquid impasto uh, with the raw umber to kind of get my initial value established. And then I went over it with that titanium white to pick out where my highlights are, like I was showing earlier. And then after it dries, I went over the top of it. The cool thing about doing it that way is you do get quite a bit of more texture variation because you are painting with a lot of texture. However, you do have to kind of paint it, over the course of a couple days, which, has its pluses and minuses, because if you paint all at once, you do kind of get a better blend of your colors, but painting in stages, you can kind of get like cooler effects or, different texture variety. Um,
And
Paper towel.
do we have time for one more question here?
Oh yeah, of course. You could ask me the questions the whole time.
Okay. Judy's wondering, with the little
Yeah.
the cow, what size of brush would you have used to paint the sky? She's used to working with watercolors and being encouraged to paint with larger brushes as they,
Um,
hold a nice point and you can get lots of line
yeah,
variation colors.
yeah. For the sky of the cow, was that the question?
Yeah, yeah, just
Yeah, yeah,
oil
yeah,
brushes
yeah.
and size.
Well, for this demo example, I wanted to kind of keep it simple. So I'm really just using, I have two brushes. One's very small, like super small. And then the other one I do have is kind of bigger. Uh, you could honestly paint with any brush size you'd like. I personally like painting with a smaller brush. Now, I do know that a lot of people do say painting with a bigger brush is probably better because you get to kind of block in the paint a lot faster. It's quicker. It makes you make choices a lot more than like a tiny brush, and a tiny brush can make it so it looks overpainted. That being said, though, I do like using a small brush. I do feel like I am going to use, let's actually here, we could paint the sky right now, actually, on this. So I'm just going to take some French ultramarine, a little bit of this magenta, make my mauve color, add some titanium white to it. Now, this reference that I have above of the cow, it looks like it's pretty much on a rainy day. So I do want to keep it kind of desaturated. I'm going to be using quite a bit of cool colors, which is, my palette's pretty cool. I have this magenta color added to it, which kind of lets me add this mauve color into kind of anything to kind of cool it out pretty quick. Um, Go ahead and get just kind of the right color here. Might be a little too dark, but that's okay. If I were going to paint this, you could use a huge brush. I'm going to use this kind of a smaller brush, really. It's not quite as tiny as this brush. Uh, I'll probably use this brush mainly for painting the cow. Something that I do feel like when you use a big brush is you're going to get quite a bit more texture variety, and it'll also kind of like blend into the canvas a little bit more, where I feel like with a smaller brush, I have more control over it. But for the sky, I do like using a brush about this size for the sky for a painting this big. Every once in a while, I do paint huge paintings also, like a big portrait painting. And sometimes for the background, I'll use like a palette knife or something. So it really kind of just depends on what effect you're going for.
And Jane,
So yeah.
could you comment on dry time when working in stages?
Yeah. So the dry time's going to vary between what colors you're using. For this palette, probably probably like a couple days, it'll be pretty dry. It won't be dry, but it'll be dry enough for you to work over the top of it. But if you're gonna use this liquid impasto stuff, it'll be dry the next day. It really speeds up the drying time significantly. So keep that in mind while you're using it, because that's part of the reason why I also like using it for underpaintings, is because it does speed up the drying time. So I could do a quick underpainting, and then the next day I could go ahead and move on uh, to adding paint over the top of it. So I'm kind of just blending in this into the canvas. I'm not painting super thickly. I want to try to get like a good gradation and get some color variety into the sky. So I'm not using like super thick globs of paint. And something I'm trying to keep in mind also is I'm trying to go from dark to light. So I want to try to keep that in mind while I'm going over the top of it. Now there's so many different ways you could paint skies. Since I'm going to be doing this all a primo, which means it's all at once, so I'm just doing it in one sitting. I'm not going to paint over the top of it. I'm going to try to nail the sky without having to repaint over the top. I'm also going to try to keep the paint thin just in case I want to change it up later uh, in the process. It's not going to fight me while I try to add paint over the top of it. I do kind of have this moon here up at the top, and my this isn't in the reference at all. I just felt like kind of including it because I thought it looks kind of cool. Um, so this painting, or this the original painting I did of this here, let me grab it really quick. I'm just gonna set this over to the side. The original painting I did of this, oops, I do kind of have it kind of cropped off just like how the picture is up there up at the top. And it's very this is kind of more abstract. I have kind of just blobs for trees, you know. I just kind of got like the shadows in there. And you know, I feel like it kind of works. You could obviously paint out, you know, what you want, and it'll just take more time. But usually when I start a painting, this is kind of what I'm seeing. I'm just seeing like blobs, like especially in the background. For the cow, I tried to paint out the cow a little bit better, but for the background, you know, it's in the background. It kind of gets blurred out. Uh, I wanted to try to incorporate that same cow into kind of like this design that I did with this other cow painting, where I kind of have like it more flushed out in the background. Uh, See, the trees are they kind of appear more closer a little bit. I got more variety in here. Um, and but it still has that same gradation in the sky. See, from dark to light. And I included like a little moon, which I'm going to try to accomplish in this painting as well. So I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little feel of what I'm going for here. And I am using just straight paint. Usually when I clean my brush, there'll be a little bit of medium on there, but since I'm painting it kind of all at once, I want to kind of just keep it just strict pigment. Later I will be using a little bit of medium to paint over the top of it, and that will be the impasto gel. So I'm just kind of adding a little bit more yellow and titanium white to kind of add in that gradation as I go down the sky of the painting. Well,
Uh,
I like to add lots of purples into my paintings, so that's kind of why I'm using that magenta as well. I think purple looks really cool in the sky.
James, so there's a couple questions about painting oil over top of a dried oil painting. Is there a
Hmm.
that needs to happen before you add the pigment?
Um, there isn't a step that needs to happen. You don't have to do anything to it. You can just paint right over the top of it. And you'll find like if you go and do like a plein air painting, or if even like the painting I'm doing right now, if I kind of stopped here and went and painted the cow, and I spent like 3 hours painting the cow, and I come back up here to the sky, this could potentially start to get kind of sticky, like it's starting to dry. And there's really nothing I need to do about it. If I waited a day or two and it all dried, I could paint over the top of it. The only thing you kind of have to be a little cautious of is once when the painting fully dries and you wanted to paint over the top of it, it's going to look different, right? It's going to be dry. So the colors aren't going to pop. The values are going to look a little different, and that's usually when the process of oiling out comes in. And that's when you take a little bit of medium like linseed oil and put it on a big brush and just kind of like scrub the whole thing with linseed oil, like a really thin layer of linseed oil, and it'll kind of bring the painting back to life so you could see the different colors. Like for example, your darks in a painting when it's dry will get really matte, and as soon as you oil it out, it'll get glossy again, and you can see the true value of the painting. So I feel like if you really wanna, I don't know, like, if I'm working on a painting I really care about, especially if it's a person, that, 'cause, it's really important to see the value structure of, like, somebody's face. I will let the painting, fully dry for the, 3, 4 days or whatever until I could, move my finger and no paint comes off. Then I'll take linseed oil and oil it out so I could see it a little bit better. Oh, I'm just adding a little bit of yellow to it. Right here is my horizon line. I know it's a little hard to see, but I'm just gonna try to get that in there. It's a little too light. Another thing is when you're painting, I usually like to go from dark to light, like I was talking about earlier. But I also like to go from kind of kind of more saturated usually to desaturated, because it's kind of easier to knock down a color than it is to bring it back to life. So if the sky looks, kind of too saturated, that's part of the reason why, is because I can knock it back down later. Like for example, if I were to throw this cadmium yellow on the canvas, and I added some colors to it, it'd probably get knocked down pretty easy to, something that's not super vibrant and saturated. But if I you know, tried to bring it back to life, I just have to keep painting on top of it over and over again until it comes back to life. So it's a little bit more difficult for it to come back. Now, as I get closer, this is when I'm gonna probably want to switch to that smaller brush, right? Because I kind of want my peaks of my trees and everything to be very well established, because it'll give the illusion of like an actual background instead of me just blending it all together. Something else I like to do, especially once when I get to the stage where I kind of have like my gradation going, is usually I'll kind of just take like my mauve color here. Um, kind of of your choice, really. Maybe just like a little bit of this purple and a little bit of this yellow, just kind of make it a little bit more saturated. And I'll just kind of like flick it around, try to get it to blend in a little bit more. I'm painting pretty thinly right here. Um, and I'm kind of leaving it open. So if I do make a mistake, I can adjust it. If I paint super thickly, it's kind of hard to fix, right? So I'm being a little cautious Um, but yeah, so once when I get here, I'm gonna go ahead and try to see if I can get the moon for the most part done. So I'm gonna try to get that same color I had up at the initial start, kind of this darker color up around the moon, less saturated. Yeah, and ooh, that's way too dark. Yeah. Okay, cool. Kind of have like a little glow around it. And then I'll probably end up painting over the moon. I kind of want to move on to the cow now, but I'll probably paint over the moon and just add like some, some yellow, kind of mix it in with what I have here, but keep it kind of lighter. Just mix it into my mauve color, more lighter, and have something like that. Maybe block in like where some cheese holes like would be in the moon at. Or yellow. Get like get my moon going. Okay. Yes.
And James, Leah's wondering what the ruler's for.
Oh, this is my mall stick, I guess. Well, I'm using it as a mall stick. It's just a big yardstick, and I can put my hand on it to steady it. Yeah. Usually you'll have something like a piece of sand, like one of those little sandbags on top of it or something. But I just use a yardstick. And then when I paint, it makes it so my hand's steady. It's a lot. Usually, if you're standing up, you could kind of steady your hand, or you could put like your finger on the canvas and steady it. But I prefer to just use excuse me, a yardstick. Okay, so back to the cow. I'm gonna go ahead and block in the shadows here. So I'm gonna take my ultramarine blue and my transparent red ochre, get kind of my dark color again, get a little bit more. And what I was saying earlier about knocking down the saturated color. So this is like super saturated for this palette, especially for like the shadows. And I'm gonna use this uh, in kind of like the darkest dark areas, so like around the udder and stuff like that. Um, and once when I kind of have this initially established, then later if I want to knock it down and kind of lighten it up a little bit, I can add that mauve color to it. So just trying to figure out where the darkest darks are. Looks like it's like right underneath this leg. And this is the same color I used for the outline. So this is what I meant by kind of refining out the sketch is I'm using that same color, just going over everything and figuring out where all the darkest darks are and just kind of laying them in. I really kind of want to focus on like the anatomy also, like big uh the big signifiers are for the shadows and the structure of the cow. Like these neck muscles kind of looks like make it look like it's like really kind of leaning around. Uh, and this ear's pretty dark. Just go ahead and block that in. Now, as I get a little more lighter, I'll just add a little bit more of this cadmium yellow to it, warm it up with this transparent red oxide. And usually when I mix something, I'll kind of just like jump around the painting and pick out different areas where I kind of see that color and add it in. I usually won't work on one section the whole time. Like if I just like sat here and tried to, get this area as perfect as possible, my palette would kind of jump all over the place trying to mix and get the right color. So I wanted to have, a form of unity with all the colors throughout the painting. So usually I'll try to work in different areas using the same color mix that I kind of have. So that way it is, very similar throughout the whole cow. Otherwise it'll look a little awkward if I have like a more green hue in the back and like a different hue up front. It won't look unified. And I can just kind of keep working in this same like little glob of paint I have right here. Anytime I need to darken it up, I'll just add more blue and red. And if I need to make it lighter, I'll add more yellow. And it makes it really simple with this palette to change your value range. Now, I do like to paint pretty thinly, um, and I probably won't be able to finish the whole cow in this demo, but I might be able to get pretty close. We'll see.
And James, Susanna's wondering if you use a projector to make your initial sketch.
No, I don't. I would like to. I know Norman Rockwell projected his paintings. I feel like there's like this kind of like weird stigma sometimes with artists like, oh, don't trace or project your paintings or anything. I would totally do that if I had a projector. But usually I will just use a grid, just like a simple grid, and I'll kind of sketch it out. Something to keep in mind when you're painting from like a photo, especially, is if you copy it one to one, it's not going to look right. It'll look kind of weird. Um, because usually when you take a photo of something, it'll distort the image, especially like a person. A cow, not so much, because I mean, me and Pamela were talking about this earlier. Like, if you paint a cow and you don't get the anatomy completely right, people don't really, look at cows all day, so they're not going to be able to necessarily tell that it's not perfect. But with a person, since you look at yourself in the mirror, most days, if not every day, you're going to be able to tell if something's, totally off. And the camera kind of distorts it, especially if you take that and then put it one to one on the canvas. It just looks a little odd. So I'd be a little cautious about using a projector and maybe focus more on like structure and anatomy than doing like a one-to-one drawing of something. But like Norman Rockwell would project it and obviously look very cartoony when he was done, but he'd use it to get like the basic initial shapes, which I think is awesome. I think that's a great process. But for me, for this painting and actually all my paintings, I usually just use the grid and kind of measure it out a little bit, and then I will just sketch it. Then usually I'll take a kneaded eraser too, and I'll just like erase the whole thing once I have my lines established, and then kind of redraw them to my liking, kind of like how I did with the sketch of oils over the top of the cow. Just kind of like refine everything, and that I feel like that's kind of the best way to go about doing a sketch is just refining it over and over again, almost like you're sculpting. Because that's kind of how I feel like painting should be also, is like you'll go over something and then maybe you'll keep changing it over and over again. And it makes it so you are more confident with making choices. Because sometimes it's kind of hard to make like a big decision, or if you get like attached to something, even though it doesn't look right, it's hard to change it.
Great question and great answer. Thank you, James. And there's some curiosity from Ted here. He's written, I'm curious to see how you'll put the background grass in place without having unrealistic texture along the edges of the cow. I thought the background should always be done first. Question mark.
Yeah, I I I like doing my background last actually, from the subject, especially when I'm painting like a farm animal like this. Um, the reason being is I like to have really defined edges, and this is kind of a personal preference. I like to have really defined edges in my paintings. Um, so sometimes I'll get a little shaky in different areas. Excuse me, and it'll make it look like it's kind of like more, I don't know, more painterly, I guess. Which is obviously not a bad thing at all. It's just not really my style of painting. I prefer to have it more the cow more pop out and have everything a little bit more abstract in the background like I have here. Um, and I can kind of define my edges even more so if I do the background, not necessarily dead last, but at least after I get the painting done of the cow, so that way I can kind of see where my edges are. Um, mainly, mainly on like the mainly on like different areas like around the mouth and on the legs and stuff. Because right now, it looks the anatomy looks kind of good, but if I wanted to have like a really crisp, sharp cut like around the kneecap of the cow or something like that, that would be when I use the background. I'll just cut that whole paint piece of the painting out, and it'll make it look more believable, like the cow's more in the foreground at that point. I'll here in a little bit, after I try to get some more of the cow established, I'll go into the background so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. Just hope we have enough time. I feel like this is probably one of the more meticulous parts of painting is getting the initial, kind of ugly stage, figuring out where everything is going to go, part of the painting done. And then once when you get out of this stage and you start really blocking everything in, it gets a lot more satisfying.
And Cindy's just typed in a question here. She's written, is there a reason why you use stand oil versus regular linseed oil?
Um, Not necessarily. I just feel like that's just what I've always kind of used. I don't really feel like there's too much of a difference for it for me because I'm mainly just using it to clean my brush. I'm not using it. I'm not going out and like mixing with it a lot. I'm just kind of using the linseed oil that's already in the tube of paint. But yeah, I feel like it's just perfect personal preference. trying to get the cow to look sort of rotund. This back leg here is kind of tricky because it looks like he like kind of rolled in mud or something. Um, I feel like in the shadows, um, the warm cool contrast, like the subtlety of the warm cool contrast, is super important, and it's kind of hard to pull off, and it takes quite a bit of time to really kind of get it in there. But if you can really swap between ultramarine blue being dominant in your mix and having this transparent red ochre dominant in your mix, where you see kind of the cooler, darker tones and the warmer tones, it'll kind of make the shadows pop a little bit more. The more color variety, the better. Definitely, I feel like even if you don't get the anatomy right, if you have some good color variety and your values are right, like the warm and cools, it makes it look a little bit more believable. It makes the eye kind of jump around. Mm. So for the eye, I don't want to overpaint it, um, because it'll look kind of weird if I have like a really flushed out cow eye, especially when he's, this small looking at me. So I'm just kind of making it a little bit just more impressionistic, I guess, than I would if I was painting him bigger or painting a portrait. And I might even leave some of the underpainting uh, there within the eye so I don't have to go in and paint it. I'm not quite sure if you could see that. Just kind of playing into where the light is right here of the eye. Maybe I'll darken it up a little bit within it, but I don't want to overpaint it and lose what I have. If something looks good, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to paint over it. If the underpainting's showing or if the background's showing still, you could just kind of leave it where it is. And I feel like that's kind of adds like a cool variety to it, especially after the painting's done. If you were to varnish it, it'll kind of make the underpainting pop out more. Like in this, I kind of have like these flicks of orange throughout the painting that I used. And that's just the underpainting, like around the tree above the cow's head. You see like these kind of orange hues popping out, even around different areas of the cow, like around his udder and his leg. And I just left those unpainted. And I think it adds kind of a cool, um, kind of like a neat little effect to it, like little flicks of gold. So I'm getting a little low on time here. I'm going to start trying to block in the main part of the cow up here. Now, since this might be probably when I switch to a bigger brush just for the sake of time, sometimes I uh, I do paint the whole cow with a small brush like that, especially this size, just so I could really get the variety in there. But I don't think I'll have enough time to really establish what he looks like with a super small brush like that. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this. this ultramarine blue. But as you can see, for these initial block-ins, I'm not using any titanium white at all right now, and that's because titanium white will kind of kill the vibrancy and kill the color of my shadows, and it'll also make it more opaque. And like I was saying earlier, I want to try to keep the shadows more translucent, and that'll kind of take that away from it if I do add titanium white. Now, later in a second, once when I kind of get this a little bit more established, in some of these shadow shapes, I will add titanium white, but it'll be from that mauve mix that I was talking about earlier, the same kind of mix I used on the sky. And that'll kind of give me the highlights of where I want in the shadows. And it'll give me kind of a cool effect because it'll not only desaturate it in some areas, but it'll make it kind of like give me like a cool highlight and it just looks really cool. I like it a lot, and I use that in my I use that color in all of my paintings. I use it for portraits. I use it in landscapes. Everything. I think it's a great transition color.
James, are you familiar with Winsor and Newton's water mixable oils? And do you know if Winsor and Newton has a impasto water mixable oil medium?
Yeah, you can actually use this medium with water mixable oils. You can mix oils like normal oils with the water mixable oils. You don't just have to use water mixable with water mixable. I actually have a painting downstairs that's kind of large that I used both uh, water mixable oil paint and regular oil paint with. So you can totally combine them and interchange them. So this impasto would totally work with that. Oh, it's a little blurry. Yeah, it's just liquid impasto.
Would they clean up with water still, or would people need to use solvents?
You would probably need to use solvent to clean your brush. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, you would I don't you wouldn't be able to get it off your brush with just water. You'd have to use solvents. I don't believe they make one that is water based of the impasto. I don't think that they could. I think it'd be a little probably like a chemistry problem. Something also that I try to do in my paintings is my brush strokes. I'll kind of try to keep it in line with how the anatomy is going. So if I kind of have like like a cylinder like the cow, I'll try to paint in line with how the cylinder is of the cow. So my brush strokes kind of gonna go with the form of whatever I'm painting, if that makes sense. So if you look at the reference here, kind of further up you get where the lights are, it kind of gets more desaturated. Initially, for right now, I'm going to block it in saturated and I will knock it back. So this is kind of the same thing I was talking about earlier, just so I could kind of control how desaturated I want it. Because if I block it in really desaturated, it's going to be hard to bring it back to life. And I don't want the cow to look dead. I don't want it to look like a little zombie.
And James, how do you personally utilize Sansador medium in your paintings or in your painting practice?
I just use it to clean the brush for the most part. Um, I will also use it when I do the stain of the canvas. So like this raw umber ultramarine blue stain I have in the background. I'll just dip my brush in a whole bunch of linseed oil and Sansador mix that I have. I'll mix them both together in a little cup. Uh, and then I will take that and just kind of rub it all over the canvas and then take a paper towel or a cloth. Kind of have to be careful with certain paper towels because they'll fall apart and get little paper towel bits all in your painting. So usually a cloth or an old t-shirt or something works the best, and then I'll wipe it off completely. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. Sometimes if I'm looking for different effects, I will combine it with my oil paint if I wanted like a drip effect, or if I really wanted to thin it out. Um, I'll combine it. But otherwise, usually just those two things. Mm. Get that. I got kind of have some color in the cow. Let's mix the color that I'm going to use for this white fur, which is a little tricky. Um, because it still has there's still shadows within the white fur, but it's definitely a different color. So I have my ultramarine blue and my transparent red ochre mix still, and I think I'm gonna bump it up with a whole bunch of yellow, and I'm gonna make almost like a green color, just kind of like a brown green color, and I think that's gonna be more of my shadow for this mix. Maybe a little bit more ultramarine blue. And I'll just kind of block that in, and that's kind of that color variety I was talking about. Mix a little bit of mauve in there to desaturate it. Go, because it is white, but it's not, it's not bright. So once when I get kind of the shadow part blocked in, then I'll start adding more titanium white to it because I don't want to kill the shadow color still. Something to keep in mind also is usually the highlights will have, things from the atmosphere like the sky. So the sky for the highlights, I'll probably add some mauve color into it, quite a bit of yellow, maybe from the moon. From the ground, the shadows, this will hit the ground and reflect off up and hit the cow. So since this is going to be grass down here, I'll kind of want to have this bottom part to be more green, to kind of match the shadow or to match the environment with the shadow. Titanium white. Kind of have this like dull mix. So just a quick thought here. If I combine ultramarine blue and this transparent red ochre together, I'll get kind of like I'll get black, right? Which I've been using for blocking in. If I take that and combine it right away with white, I'll get like a gray color. And it'll be pretty desaturated. Um, and that will be great for certain shadows, like the one I'm working on right now for like the stomach. But if I do that with other parts of the painting, like up here with the fur, it'll kill the color. So I kind of want to be pretty cautious about using titanium white uh, when I'm working on the cow for different sections, especially in the shadows. The cow's face is a little bit more blue, so I'm gonna add a little bit of that mauve to it and try to get around the edges here of his face or her face. And it's okay if the initial block in is a little too dark compared to what the reference is, because I could always go in and lighten it up. Um, if it's too light and I need to go in and darken it, it's gonna kind of be difficult, and I might have to let it dry before I could do that. Now, I'm not even really using my brush cleaning medium that much, mainly because all these values are pretty close together, especially for the cow's face and just most of the painting in general. So usually if I want to, paint something like the sky, I have to clean my brush, or if I wanted to paint the grass, I'll clean my brush. But for some certain parts of the cow, I want to mix my palette together and kind of get the full range of my palette to really unify all the colors together. And so I sometimes just don't even clean my brush. I'll just work right into my palette. Uh, and you, if you overmix, usually people say you get like a mud color, and that is true. But for this painting and most paintings, if you're painting like a person also, the skin is just a mud color, you know? So a lot of times getting a mud color isn't necessarily a bad thing. Okay. I think it looks more than some white. And you see like right around here where I'm painting the nose of the cow. Zoom in a little bit. A little hard to tell, but right around here, if I were to paint this after I already did the background, um, it would bleed into the background, especially if I'm painting alla prima. So it's a little easier to paint it now and then work in the background afterwards so I could really kind of separate my background from my foreground. And we'll zoom back up so you can see the palette again. Kind of gets a little warm around his nose. A good trick to make colors pop also is if you surround a cool color with a warm color, it'll, really pop out, and then vice versa. So sometimes like in the highlights as well in my paintings, if I have like like a sunset scene or something like that, and I have like really bright colors, I'll put cool colors around them, and then they'll really pop out. So something just to kind of keep in mind here. It's not super present in this painting, like around the face and stuff, because it's kind of a rainy scene. But I'm still trying to think of that as I'm going through and blocking this in. And then for the nose, I think I might make the cow's nose a little bit more pinker than it is in the reference. Uh, just for fun. It's always fun to kind of exaggerate things a little bit, especially because it's your painting. You don't want it to look exactly like the photograph. Otherwise, somebody would probably just want to get the photograph instead of getting your painting, you know? So I always try to add something fun to the painting, and add like my own little touch to it as well. Now I am using a lot of white here, and that's because the fur is very white up here at the top. I'm still kind of mixing in the mauve color a bit, and I can always mix other colors into it as well. But just for now, I'm just gonna add in the white. Now, if I did have a underdrawing here, it would make it kind of a lot easier for me to kind of see my value structure, especially in the kind of these more finer details of the face. Um, but it's not the end all be all. You could still kind of see it okay. I would recommend doing an underpainting, especially I used to be super afraid of painting animals. I thought they were so hard to paint, and I'd usually just stick to painting people. And but as soon as I started incorporating my underdrawings that I would do for people into animals, it kind of really opened it up for me quite a bit, and I enjoyed it a lot more. Um, and it made me have more successful paintings. So once when you kind of get more comfortable painting animals, and you could kind of move away from doing like an underdrawing, or even having like an undersketch like this. I'm not anywhere near, that confident in myself, but like, somebody like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Richard Schmidt or somebody like that. They would, just do like a super messy, sketch with oils, and you can't really tell what's going on. You have no edges or anything. And then, 30 minutes later, boom, there's like a chicken, or a cow or a barn. Um, and it takes years and years and years of practice to get like that. It's super respectable to be able to do that. But for my purposes, I like to kind of have like a more refined sketch, you know, and then I could have more of a successful painting and have fun, even though there is some work and some time involved to get there. Okay, so that looks kind of like a cow face. So I'm gonna go ahead and block in some of this grass now, just so we could kind of see what's going on. Um, Doing okay on time. Okay, so for let's do like some of this horizon line. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my ultramarine blue again, and I'm gonna get a little bit of my yellow ochre, or sorry, cadmium yellow. Get my green color, and since it's in the background, I do want to kind of add some of this magenta to it, to kind of purple it out a little bit, give it some more variety, because I'll get more into my pure green the closer I get to the painting. So up here, I kind of want to have it more desaturated, maybe a little bit more purple, a little bit more blue, which, if I combine all these colors together, I'm going to get gray, right? And that's kind of what I want because it's in the background. But I want to focus on kind of having some color variety within that so it doesn't look boring, right? And this is kind of where like some abstraction comes in. So anywhere I kind of feel like adding warm, like if I wanted it warm, maybe add more magenta to it and kind of block it in. If I wanted it more, you know, uh, darker, I'll add more blue to it, some more green, and just kind of have like different versions of gray to kind of signify, like, oh, these are trees, and let the eye kind of assume what it is, not, you know, let me blatantly tell everybody what it is. And then the same kind of process here that I'm talking about with the cow is once when I kind of block in this horizon line here, um, then I'm going to bring down the sky and choose which areas I want kind of more blended and which areas of my horizon line I want like really crisp. slightly low on time, so I'm going to just kind of use just that part as an example. And now I'm definitely going to clean my brush because I'm going to go back up to the sky. Don't want it to bleed together too much. So I'm going to go ahead and take my titanium white, a little bit of magenta, a little ultramarine blue, kind of have that mauve color again. And I think I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to it. Add some more white, more blue. I'm going to block that in so I kind of have my horizon line.
And James, could you zoom in?
Oh yeah, of course. It's a little hard to see. Because the this value is very close to what my background is, right? So it's a little hard to see, but yeah, just kind of block that in. And that's kind of the nice thing about adding a or priming the panel is it really gives it unity throughout the whole painting. And you could really use any color you want when you prime the panel. I've seen people do it. You could use like magenta if you wanted to. You could use just this transparent red oxide if you wanted it really warm. It's really kind of up to you. I chose kind of a gray color just for the demonstration purposes. But it's totally up to you what color you'd like to use. It also kind of helps the oil paint flow a little bit better as well and gets rid of the intimidation of the white canvas. Okay, so yeah, got kind of my horizon line going here. Let's go ahead and move down here and kind of block in around the cow. Now, normally when I paint, like I said, because I'm kind of on a time crunch, I would probably flush out this whole horizon line before I moved on. Um, and it kind of gives some more unity to the painting, make me feel a little bit more confident, and get rid of this background so I could kind of see what's going on a little bit better. But we'll go ahead and move on to the grass around the cow. So my mix is going to be some cadmium yellow again, ultramarine blue. It's probably going to be like the most saturated green I'm going to get. Um, and I don't want to use this until usually like at the end of the painting, I'll use this exact mix of just ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow if I even use it with a little bit of titanium white for like the super highlights of the grass. But for right now, I'm going to take the same mix. I'm going to add a little bit of transparent red oxide to it. And then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of block this in a little bit. Just gonna try to focus on getting the edges of the cow, and then I can take a bigger brush later and define the grass a little bit more and really block it in a lot faster. Keep it kind of by the sky mix, so I could kind of mix in this white and blue to kind of gray it out a little bit. More white, more yellow.
And James, with this being your first layer, you've been working with Winsor Newton liquid and paint. Now, could you go over for us one more time when the impasto medium would be utilized?
Yeah, yeah. So usually, if I'm going to use the impasto medium, it'll be at the very beginning of the painting when I'm doing the underdrawing, like I was talking about with the sphere, or it'll be at the very end of the painting when I'm trying to add some more effects, like maybe like some sharp grass, or make like certain parts of the cow really pop out, like his horn or something. So here I will show you that in a second. Give me 1 second. The color variety for the grass, um, adding red to it or the transparent red oxide, kind of grays it out. It gives me like a good warm variety to it. So I'm just going to add that in a little bit here and there. And that kind of helps the face pop out a little bit more, and I can see my value a little bit better. This is super white. But since I kind of have it blocked in, I could kind of see where everything's at, instead of doing it at the end. So if I wanted to lay in some grass in the background, I can use this liquid impasto here to kind of thin it out. And maybe I'll even switch to a bigger brush. And I'll try to get do I have an example of that? So the grass in the background of the cow here, I actually did use the impasto gel, kind of like where the horizon line is, and it thins it out and makes it kind of thick, like I was talking about. So I can kind of take and just kind of spread it around back there to kind of make it look like it is grass, um, without having to paint super thickly. So it looks like it's kind of in the background. Oops. Grab a little bit more of this. Now, if I'm using this, it will make the paint dry quite a bit faster, so keep that in mind. But I can kind of just smudge it around in the back here, and it gives me some variety that is, uh, has a lot of entropy to it, so it's just kind of all over the place. Even though, which is nice, so I don't have to go in and try to define everything.
And there's a question that popped up about the background landscape. Would you match brush strokes to go with the direction of everything as you did with the cow's anatomy?
Yeah, yeah. I usually try to go horizontally, especially in the background here. Um, so for the sky, I was painting more vertically, like up and down. But for the grass in the background, I'm kind of keeping it more horizontal to go with like, the gradation of the grass. And then on the foreground, I'll probably keep it horizontal, but as I get closer to me, I'll probably change it to more vertical strokes. So that way it looks like it's, closer to me. Block that in, and this kind of just gives me like a good initial thin base also, and I could refine it later if I wanted to by adding, more paint or whatever. It makes it look kind of like there's like little hills and different kinds of grass gradations in this horizon line. And I do love this stuff. I'll use it throughout the painting. Um I don't I've been trying to not overuse it lately because I feel like I've been getting kind of reliant on it, because I do love it so much. But yeah, it's uh it's very versatile. Here, I actually do have an example to show you guys of what it would look like with an underdrawing if I were to use this liquid impasto to kind of determine my lights, like I was talking about with this sphere. So I do have my liquid impasto right here, and then this is just raw umber to kind of refine my sketch. Now I did let the raw umber dry completely, which is only takes like a day because raw umber dries really fast. And then I went over and established my lights with titanium white and the liquid impasto.
Nice.
And here's an example of kind of what that would look like. I have one cow kind of set this here. I have it kind of set up side by side so you could see what it would look like if I was going to paint with that liquid impasto. So here I have my sketch established, and I went over it with raw umber to determine where all my dark values are within the cow. The cow's dark, he's in the shadow. And then for the lights, this is the same kind of problem I was having with the cow that we're painting now, is the under part here is white, obviously, but it's still in shadow. So I'm painting it very thin, but I'm still using that liquid impasto with the titanium white. So it kind of looks white, but it's still in a shadow and it's thin. So it kind of goes off of that same John Singer Sargent thing I was talking about, where you're painting the shadows thin but thickly, which is something that I really struggled with until I found this medium. And it also adds texture for the underpainting, which I think is really cool, especially if you want to have like a lot of texture in your painting, which I prefer because it makes it look more painterly. Um, so you could see like it really protrudes out here. So I already kind of have these hairs established uh, for when I'm going to paint over them. And they'll be there depending on how thick or thin I paint over the cow. Um, so I use the same method for this cow, but I already painted over them. So I was using this same color palette, and then I went over my under sketch and painted over them. You kind of see what I was talking about also, where the shadows kind of protrude out. I'm painting thinly. And once when I go through and I add the green to the cow on the background and separate the cow, all these warm kind of highlights within the shadows of the cow will pop out and it'll make the cow feel really alive. And you can see that in this painting here, like around the udder and in the arms and the armpits and stuff like that, especially like right here, you could kind of see it kind of pop out and separate the cow. So this is very cool and the cow's warm. So you could kind of play off of your initial underdrawing and your staining your canvas to kind of bring some life into your painting.
Great example, James. I am going to give you a little bit of a time check here, just at the tail end. There is a question about the painting you've been working on today and what the light source is. Where is the light coming from? Or
Right. So that is actually kind of a tricky question because it is a super grayed out painting, right? Or a grayed out reference. So I did add the moon up here. I didn't really quite get to the highlights under the top of the cow. I will probably add some more mauve and yellow that is not necessarily seen in the picture onto the top of the cow to kind of make it look like the cow is getting hit by the moonlight a little bit. But it is a very rainy, desaturated scene, which makes it a little challenging, right? So it's a very bland lighting setup. But there are still shadows. Most of the shadows are underneath the cow and on the leg. And I feel like you can kind of fudge like some shadow like right here and around the legs and stuff like that. But there isn't like a super direct, kind of like a Rembrandt, light source where you have the triangle on the side of the face and the one side of the face is lit. I'm not really getting that with this reference, but I do think it's kind of fun to paint, and it also lets you kind of focus on using color to establish your values instead of having just like here's a dark and here's a light. It gives it a little bit more play. It's kind of a little fun to paint. It's definitely kind of hard, but if you go out and do like a plein air painting during the day on like a rainy day, you'll really kind of see how close your values have to be. And that really plays into this palette as well because there is no direct, light like there is with this painting that I was showing you just a second ago. Like there is a very clear cut light coming from the back, and that's why the cow's face is so lit up. Um, this one's kind of more of like a rainy day type one, and that's why there's no black in the palette. There's no really like dark colors. If you mix them together, you kind of get like a nice gray shadow. If you wanted to kind of expand this palette a little bit. I don't really think you'd not you could still get the same effect of like a really crisp shadow with this palette because you do have ultramarine blue. Um, but if you wanted to, you could maybe add a instead of using this transparent red ochre, you could change it out with like a transparent red oxide, which is it looks kind of like barbecue sauce. And if you combine that with or even like burnt umber, if you combine that with ultramarine blue, you get a little darker. You could add yellow ochre to the palette, which is another color I love as well. But I wanted to keep it kind of simple for this demonstration.
Amazing. Thank you so much, James. There's a lot of really sweet comments coming into the chat and gratitude for your presentation today. Just packed with information. I hope everyone goes home with, you're probably all going to go home with a list of things that you learned today, but I hope you're able to like, if it was a lot, just like grab on to one thing that you learned today and really just kind of go with it. Um, yeah.
I'm sorry if I'm all over the place too. I wanted to try to not bore you guys or you know tell you guys. I wanted to give you guys a bunch of information so you can hopefully get everybody gets at least one thing from the demonstration. But yeah, uh, is if anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know. Um, I'm not sure how much time we have left.
Yeah,
Uh,
we're kind of here winding it up. Our time is coming to an end, folks, unfortunately, but I will invite James back. I personally recommended him. I know James gives the most amazing demos. His level of knowledge and understanding when it comes to oil painting is really, really like incredible, and that it's evident that he's spent a long time kind of studying old masters paintings and is a well-educated artist. So James, it's just such a pleasure that you could join us today, and everyone for being
oh,
here with us.
thanks. Yeah,
Take,
thank you for being here.
yeah.
Appreciate it.
There's a cute question. How did you get so interested in cows?
Well,